It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Off the Shelf, a book discussion series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today I'll be sitting down, well, virtually, with Tendayi Viki to discuss his latest book, Pirates in the Navy: How Innovators Lead Transformation or Should Lead Transformation. So, Tendayi Viki, welcome to this podcast. Thrilled to have you. Tendayi and I met about 6 years ago now already when I was introduced to him through a mutual acquaintance who said, "You have to go and talk to Tendayi," which I did. And Tendayi immediately sent me a free copy of his book, The Corporate Startup, which I thought, obviously, to a Dutchman, a free copy, that is manna from heaven. And so we stayed in touch ever since. And I actually have used the corporate startup as my main book in my MBA program when I teach executive MBA students as professor of management practice. So it's a real pleasure to have Tendayi here with us, investing his time, because he's a very busy man right now, as he has just written his third book and is in high demand. Let me kick it off immediately and ask the obvious question, Tendayi. What the heck is pirate in the Navy? That's an oxymoron like I've never heard before. You probably want to explain that first as we gradually move into the conversation.
Exactly. It's both an oxymoron and a bit of clickbait as well, right? All wrapped in together. But a pirate in the Navy is effectively this paradox that corporate innovators face, right? They're part of this machine that's designed to run the core business, designed with the bureaucracy that is deliberately designed to make things go slower so people can do proper checks on things, legal compliance, etc. And yet these people are being asked to innovate inside these same spaces. And innovation is completely different, right, in terms of how you manage it and how you do it well. You have to move fast, you have to break things, you have to fail, you have to test, you have to iterate. And also all of these practices are kind of like pirate type practices. And so a pirate in the Navy is effectively, the actual oxymoron is corporate innovator. It's just pirate in the Navy is a way to sort of illustrate that kind of same point.
So that's cool. That's clear. So let's get into the content of the book. I think you've broken it up in a few segments of things you really want to go and get across. So why don't you go and start off with the first segment?
Yeah, no, I mean, so the thing that's always been interesting for me is if you're a corporate innovator, how do you do the work well? Like, how do you succeed as a pirate in the Navy? And I know that what we tend to do these days, especially outside, in society, is we celebrate entrepreneurs a lot. Like the more brash the entrepreneur, like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, the more we celebrate them. But actually, some of those behaviors that entrepreneurs have may not be really useful when you're working inside a large organization, right? Sure, you need to be good at coming up with ideas, testing those ideas, being market aware. You also need some level of proactivity. You need to be sort of tenacious as you sort of pursue your goals. But actually, the corporate innovator has got one extra challenge that they need to face, which is that they cannot succeed without actually working with and collaborating with colleagues in the main business. If you want to take your idea to scale inside the main business, you have to really be thinking about building relationships. And so, a pirate in the Navy is really somebody who's got really great innovation skills, but is also really good at managing corporate politics and building relationships in order to let their sort of ideas scale.
Being in touch with the realities of the business, I guess, is the way I summarize it. Is not an entrepreneur is by him or
Yeah.
herself focusing on one specific business proposition. An entrepreneur, a pirate in the Navy, is part of a larger entity in which you need to operate effectively. And you mentioned the word relationships, which I think is very
Yeah,
powerful.
and I think innovators really need to be self-aware around that because sometimes we can act as if we're unaware of what's going on around us. In fact, I've seen some corporate innovators that celebrate whenever they get some form of separation from the mother company. They're like, "Oh, we're finally free from the MBAs. Now we can do whatever we want." It's like, no, you can't. You have to still be thinking about how you can build those relationships or a bridge to the core business that will allow your ideas to become successful.
And if you don't, then you get to the other side of things, which is the whining, as you've expressed to me, a few times, right? It's like, I want to do innovation, but nobody loves me, nobody wants to join me, nobody wants to collaborate and cooperate with me.
Yes, that's like, I mean, every time I meet corporate innovators, I feel like pulling out a Freudian couch for them to sort of lie there and sort of just talk about their troubles, because corporate innovators are complaining about the same things all the time. They're complaining about legal and compliance, finance. Leaders don't want to scale my ideas. I'm not being given space to test. I'm not being given space to do anything. And you suddenly realize that every single thing that a corporate innovator complains about is actually connected to their ability to build relationships, like to the extent that,
And
yeah,
influence.
and also influence leaders and drive change and all of these things, and to the extent that they don't have that skill set, they're much more likely to actually to actually struggle. So actually, my feeling, and this is quite a strong feeling that I have, is beyond just teaching people how to do business model campus design, the testing their ideas, iterating, experiments, design thinking, focusing on all those things. I think that if we're going to really train corporate innovators, we really need to sort of teach them all these skills of how to win friends and influence people, and I think that's a really important thing that they need to be able to do.
So if we step back from what does a pilot in a navy really need to achieve, needs to do through influencing and building relationships and being in touch with the realities. You are now a consultant, and of course, as a consultant, you have a two by two.
Yeah.
But I
Yes.
must say, but I must say, this is a powerful one. So why don't you explain what are the two jobs for the
Oh yeah,
privateers?
no, that makes sense. I mean, you're not a consultant until you come up with a good two by two. So now I have mine. Now the only thing that's left is I haven't named my four quadrants yet, but I'm sure I'll get to that at some point.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, I hadn't noticed that yet. Yeah, you have an opportunity, man.
Exactly. But I actually think that the two jobs of the corporate innovator are value creation, and and when I talk about value creation, I talk about the development of new innovative ideas that end up creating value for the organization in terms of bringing something that customers value, having impact and value propositions that resonate with customers, but also figuring out a way to bring value back to the organization through profitable, scalable, sustainable business models. Because we don't just innovate for the fun of it, right? We don't open innovation labs so people can hang out and make kale juice. We open these innovation labs with the hope that from the lab will come products, services, or ideas to even improve our current processes in a way that allows us to increase the value of the organization somehow. And so that's the first thing that I think that innovators need to be authentically caring about. Now, the the problem, the challenge that you face is in the efforts to create value, our innovators often run into corporate roadblocks, so in terms of bureaucracy and culture. So the second job is to make sure that we're also, driving transformation and change within our organization, so that our companies can do innovation as a repeatable process. There are ways to create value without changing your company, but that takes a lot of work. You have to protect your baby, you have to jump over hurdles, et cetera, et cetera. If you can also at the same time do the work to lower some of those hurdles, it means that future innovators can then use this path that you've created to to become successful. So two jobs for the innovator: value creation is one, and culture change is the other.
Very clear, but also very ambitious. That's not a
Yeah.
mean task for the poor privateer. But I totally support that. I mean, I also see in my experience when I talk to leaders, innovation leaders, that there is a lot of gyration, a lot of activity around innovation. With pool tables and
Yes.
all. But where's the value, right? Where's the meat? What do you actually deliver? Innovation is only successful when if it produces value. And culture change, as we all know, is not an easy thing in its own right, right? Because it deals with humans.
Yes.
So in terms of tackling that, then let's take them one by one,
Mhm.
maybe, and look at maybe the value creation first. How do you see what do they need to do in that area specifically, Tendai, based on your insights from the book?
Yeah, so I mean, and you're aware of this, right, John? You've seen this out in the world. You know, a lot of people think innovation is about ideas. I've even heard a leader say to the team, "Bring me a 10x idea," like as if you know a 10x idea the moment you see it, right? And so there's this excessive focus on ideation and everything that goes with that, right? Idea competitions, hackathons, and all of these things ultimately are not designed to create value. So you end up with this innovation theater, which is a whole bunch of activities that look like innovation: football tables, sticky notes, design jams, all of these things. But they're not really thinking about how to take those ideas from where they are all the way to scale where they're actually thinking about creating value. So we often say to sort of our corporate innovators, you need to have success. You need to have early wins. You need to create things that go out into the market and actually create value for your organization. So you need to be thinking about desirability. Who wants this? What problem are we solving? Feasibility. Can we create this service or product? Viability. Could we do this profitably? And finally, adaptability. Could we actually scale this idea if we launched it out into the market? And that really matters, right? In terms of making sure that we're creating value beyond just having innovation theater.
To me,
You're
I
gonna have to
always
edit that out.
cheers. No, that's all human. I always say innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, right? It's ideation is the 1%, but then how do you go and take that into the choice of the ideas that you have? Because you have hundreds of ideas sometimes. Picking the right one based on some of the principles that you just highlighted, design your proposition, qualify your proposition, develop your proposition, manufacture, get manufacturing right, and ultimately even commercialize it effectively, and then keeping it alive for years and years onwards.
Yeah.
So indeed, I fully support that point.
You know the worst thing,
Um,
right? Is I've heard some innovators say, "But that's not my job." Like I come up with the ideas, I do a little bit of testing, and then I hand it over to the big company to work on it. It's like that doesn't make any sense. That's your job, like all the way to when the product is in the hands of the customer. That's your job. And if you don't embrace that
no
as
impact.
if you don't embrace that as your
Sorry.
job, then you're not going to be successful. Yeah,
No impact, no innovation.
exactly.
That's a great way to end this first segment. We're going to take a short break for some quick announcements, and we'll be back in just a minute to continuing this conversation and look at the other side of what privateers need to be doing.
Looking for additional business insights in this subject area and beyond this podcast, go to tcb.org and explore our Human Capital Centre. Uncover a large array of products hosted by the Conference Board in focus areas like diversity and inclusion, talent management, and many others. Products include peer-to-peer networking events, expert briefings, publications, data and analysis, webcasts, videos, and blogs.
Hello, and welcome back to our conversation with Tendayi Viki on his book, Pirates in the Navy. We just touched on, reviewed, explored the value creation that is the job of an innovator. The other part, as Tendayi introduced, is transformation at the same time. How do you create a culture change, which we all know is not easy? So what are your tips and your tricks and your principles, better said, Tendayi, to go and get that done?
Yeah. So and this one is a really interesting challenge because when you meet a lot of innovators, they just want to work on their ideas. They don't want to be bothered with all this politics. But remember, we spoke about the things they complain about, and the things they complain about are all connected to politics. So it's almost unavoidable. And so the question I often have for innovators, especially corporate innovators, is what do you think is your job, right? Is your job to create innovations, which is new products and services? Or do you think your job is to create innovators, i.e., create the context that sort of births and supports innovation teams while they're doing their work? And the distinction is just this. People who are focused on creating innovations are only focused on their product, whatever it is that they're working on. But people who are focused on creating innovators are really thinking about how they can create a pathway for innovators to walk on. Like, how do we get funding for innovators? How do we get the right frameworks and tools for innovators? How do we create the right skills? And so, whenever an innovation team runs into a problem, let's say with legal and compliance, rather than just helping that one team get over that hurdle, they start thinking about how we can change the process that legal and compliance uses so that other teams can come through and also do their work well. And so that really, really matters. And it really emphasizes this notion that you cannot succeed unless you build those relationships with key functions.
Yeah, investing in politics is something that needs to be done. Many innovators feel like I don't want to get involved in politics, but of course, politics is only a proxy for people work in social systems.
Yes,
And so you need to understand where the powers lie. You need to understand where the impact lies, where the opportunities and where the risks lie,
exactly.
and get in touch with those.
I want to make a
Understand
T-shirt.
them,
I want to make a T-shirt.
influence them.
I
What's
want to make a
that
T-shirt.
of
Yeah,
this with this quote?
corporate innovation is politics.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something that we did some work earlier on with serial innovators, and we had to look at who are these serial innovators and what do they do. And indeed, they take on politics heads on, and they understand the things rather than running away from it and go like, "I don't deal with politics." Um, so outstanding. Building relationships, facing the realities of a large organization and its complexities to get things done. So when you then summarize these two things, right, value creation and transformation and culture change, how do you then go and make impact? How would you describe that together in terms of generating impact?
Yeah. So what it does, right, and I've noticed this inside large organizations is there's a bit of like FOMO, right, like a fear of missing out. Like when they hear that another company is doing an innovation lab, they want one. When they hear that another company is doing the kickbox, they want one. When they hear another company is doing a hackathon, they want one. But now, if you give them this lens of thinking about value creation or culture change, they can then take any one of those programs they're thinking of establishing in their organization and use this two by two to judge whether or not they should be doing this. So, if we do this innovation lab, what's the goal of this innovation lab? Is it to create value or to transform the culture? And if it's creating value, how is it creating value? And if it's transforming our organization, how is it transforming our organization? And what's interesting is when I walk into companies and I see them with several programs that they're already running, I often do an exercise with them of like mapping all these programs on this two by two. And there's a lot of angry people in the room, right? Because when we start getting into the nitty gritty of how are you creating value, how many projects have you launched in the last 4 years, how much revenue, savings, whatever have you generated, they find that difficult to explain, but they're saying that they're creating value. Or they can say our program is to create culture. Okay, which elements of the culture have you changed? Where do we now have repeatable processes for innovation? And they don't have any. So all of those programs become like almost like an innovation theater. So you could call my two by two the innovation theater tracker or something like that, right? But what it also does is it helps people then make decisions about how to improve those programs and make them better.
So these principles, I think, are clear. Then it's that framework, which I think is very powerful. But then you already mentioned the word how. How do you get there? And I know you've created a nice recipe of six, right? Two times three interventions that need to be done for privateers to climb the mountain, as you call
Yes.
it, and plant the flag.
Yeah. So
Why don't you go and share those principles with
yeah,
us?
so that's really interesting, right? I find that one of the challenges that innovators face right at the beginning, like if you're just starting off. So these steps are for people that are just right at the beginning of their program and trying to think of how to change their company. Right when you're starting off, it's really hard to have credibility. A lot of corporate innovators I meet, they have difficulty in terms of establishing their credibility. Even if you've done it successfully in another company, leaders will still doubt your ability to do it in this company because every company thinks it's unique, right? So, oh yeah, they're doing it at Amazon, but we're not Amazon, right? So you have to build your credibility. And I often say the best way to build your credibility is to don't just jump in and start doing programs. You really have to figure out what works for each company. So you have to assess each company in terms of where it is. So start with discovery. Talk to innovators inside the organization. Where are their blockers? Where are their enablers? And use that discovery process to do the second step, which is identify early adopter leaders. So you want to do discovery to understand the company, but you also want to do discovery so you can identify these early adopter leaders. That's the second thing you want to do, because early adopter leaders are the ones that can help you and support the way you're working and sort of help you implement the process. And then after you identify these early adopter leaders, you want to work with them to create early wins. You want to have innovation be successful inside the company, not outside. Because once you've got like this knowledge of the company, these early adopter leaders at an early win, you've now got the credibility to start telling stories that allow you to be allowed to do more inside the organization. You basically bought yourself time. And then with that time that you've bought yourself, you can then start thinking about doing the next three steps, which are steps connected to embedding innovation within the organization. So design a repeatable process. What are the stages of innovation? What tools do we use? What are the stage gates, etc. Also, align those stages and that innovation process with key functions, like legal, compliance, and finance, because you need to be working with them to deliver innovation, and build your own community of practice through skills training and just sort of building just a community of people that are engaged and kind of interested in this. And as you've got the early wins, credibility, now you've embedded the program. Now you're then ready to start scaling that and taking it to a much greater place within the organization.
I find it powerful. Start with discovery, experiment, learn, identify early adopters that become your partners. This is where you build your relationships. You start building the relationships, right? As you talked, get that early win and celebrate. Get some credentials, get some confidence, and then you go to the next section, the next two, or next the second section of three. Get to a repetition, make it sustainable and systemic, align with the key functions. Innovation is a multifunctional team sport.
Mm-hmm.
And build your community so that you go and really involve and invite the full corporation towards making innovation a way of
Yeah.
life. That's a wonderful set of indicators and a set of principles to follow. I want to go and close this conversation. We can talk for another hour
Yeah.
easily, but it's a podcast, so we got to keep it short. Summarize your key thinking in just 1 minute. What would you tell innovation leaders? What would you tell business leaders to go and really make this change of creating value and transforming your corporation and your organization into the future, which this world, this VUCA and steroids world, so badly needs?
Yeah. So we care about two things, and I think me and you care about the same things. The first thing we care about is, are the innovators that are working inside our organizations creating things that have impact in the outside world? Are we creating value? Are we doing things that are beneficial for society, beneficial for customers, beneficial for the organization? And the only way we do that is if the ideas we're working on somehow find their way out into the real world and succeed there. So we care about that. So that's the first question we have to ask ourselves, like, how many of these things do we have out in the world? Or which of the things we have right now that we're working on that are close to becoming those sort of successful ideas? So that's the first thing we actually care about. Are we having impact? The second thing we care about is, can you do it again? So you launched this one thing that worked out as a great innovation. Can you do it again? 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 Is it repeatable? Can you do it over and over and over again? So we care about having impact, and then we care about our ability to keep doing that as an organization. And that's really the 2x2 that I'm talking about, right? We care about value creation so that we're having impact, and then we care about culture change so that we're able to do it again and again and again and again. And then once you've done that, you've kind of built this organization. You could call it an invincible company if you want, that is able to actually go out into the world and sort of survive this VUCA environment.
I won't say anything anymore because I think this is a beautiful summary, very eloquently stated of the principles that you describe so wonderfully in the book and have expressed this so distinctly, I guess, and clearly in this conversation. I want to thank you very much, Tendayi, for having spent the time with us. You're a very busy man. The book is propelling you into further glory, and well deserved. So thank you for taking the time with us. And thank you, audience, for having joined us and spent your precious time with us. I hope you found it valuable. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to our off-the-shelf book discussion podcast series, or explore the entire catalog of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts.